Hey, what's up, everybody? It's just Charles Sabansi to welcome you guys to another episode of the DREAMERSPRO show. We cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and we give you guys a fresh perspective on things. And always cinema today, we got a hell of a show for you guys. Before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you're not following the DREAMERSPRO podcast, please make sure you do so. We have that pinned in the comments section below. So as you guys know, JJ Redick is fresh off of a rant on ESPN First Take yesterday, because he's tired of the way sports media is being conducted. He's tired of people not giving every single NBA player all of the credit in the world. And he just went up there to basically whine and moan and complain and cry and all of these stuff. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who didn't hear some of the comments from JJ Redick on ESPN First Take, we want to play some of it for you now. And then we're going to come back and continue on the show. Take a listen to some of the things that JJ Redick had to say on ESPN First Take yesterday.
Question is, does he get the credit he deserves? I think as a basketball player, Stephen, I think you're right. I think he does get the credit he deserves, but there's always a but attached to it because of the decision. I talked about this in 2016, right after he chose to go to the Warriors, and I was a fan of that move. And I was on the Clippers and had to go compete against the Warriors. I knew our championship window was closed the second he signed that contract. But I was still a fan of the move because I believe players, they get drafted, serve their rookie contract, play the 5 years. He gave 9 years, 9 great years to Oklahoma City. He had the right to pursue whatever was going to make him happy at the time, just like he had the right after the Warriors run to pursue whatever was going to make him happy at the time. We are athletes. We have a finite amount of time to enjoy this ride. I had no problem with it. I have no problem, actually, with any decision he's made. Steph Curry is one of the greatest players of all time. This is not me pitting Kevin Durant against Steph Curry. The reality is, in the 17 finals, the 18 finals, Kevin Durant was the best player on the floor. He was the best player on the floor. There's a reason he won those finals MVPs. 35, 8 and 5 and 17, 56%, 47% from 3, 29, 11 and 8 assists in 18, 53%, 41%. He was the best player. To me, he doesn't get the credit he deserves as a defensive player. These last few seasons, he's been phenomenal on that end. He doesn't get the credit he deserves because of his decision-making, which everyone wants to critique his decision-making. I don't necessarily think that's fair. I don't. And you can have qualms here about his decision to team up with Kyrie in Brooklyn. Here's the reality. They were a James Harden injury, a Kyrie injury, and a toenail away from probably winning the 21 NBA Finals.
Facts.
That's the reality. And look, NBA history is littered with what-ifs. Littered with what-ifs. On the leadership front, not everybody leads the same way. Have you been in a locker room with Kevin Durant? Here's what I know about Kevin Durant. I know that Kevin Durant leads by example. I know the way he approaches his craft. This is a guy that lives, breathes, eats, sleeps basketball. That's a form of leadership. Now I want to address Stephen A's point. Since when is it players' jobs to educate people on basketball? When did that become a thing? When did that become a thing? Isn't that our job? Isn't that our job?
I'll answer.
I do that as my job. That's my job to educate people on basketball.
I'm letting you speak, and then I'll answer.
It's our job, Stephen A., to educate people on basketball. It's our job. And here's the reality. This is the ecosystem we live in. I can do a video on my podcast. Where I break down the last 9 games the Pelicans have used Zion Williamson as the primary ball handler and what type of actions that has led to. I looked it up this morning. 54,000 views on YouTube. But I want to call out a coach yesterday. Oh, that gets tens of millions of engagements. That's the ecosystem we live in. So do fans actually want to be educated or not? Mm-hmm. Do they?
Mm-hmm. Okay, can I respond?
Of course you can. It's your show.
Thank you so much. First of all, a couple of things, because I'm glad you promised your wife that you wouldn't yell and that you broke your promise to her. So plan on going home and explaining the fact that you just violated, what you promised your wife. So at about 10 minutes into the show. So that's number one. But that's a personal problem, and I'm sure you'll handle it. Number two, when you talk about his job to educate, nobody said it was his job. But the fact of the matter is, what you're highlighting is something that indirectly, if not directly, you've lamented for quite a long time. And you're going to have to get over that, JJ. Just like Kevin Durant has the right to play. Let me finish. He has the right to play. And he also has the right to keep his thoughts to himself.
So you heard what he had to say. JJ is getting to the point where he's beginning to turn off a lot of people because he's acting like a know-it-all, and he's acting like as if the way he views sports media should be the standard, and it should be the way that people conduct sports media. For whatever reason, that's how he feels. This is the same JJ Redick that sat up there and said Larry Bird and all of those guys weren't great shooters. The era that those guys played and Bob Cousy and them were playing with a bunch of firemen and firemen. And then he said that the 90s wasn't a very physical era. We talk about the freedom of movement in the NBA today. So what is the inverse of freedom of movement? Lack of movement. So how do you accomplish that? Aren't there going to be a lot of people touching and grabbing and pulling and all of that? Wouldn't that constitute a more physical basketball game? That's what JJ Redick said. And Hall of Famer, top 75 player called his comments idiotic. That's Dominique Wilkins. And by one of the greatest team builders in the history of the NBA, Jerry West, also questioned JJ Redick's basketball IQ. This is the guy that's running around explaining basketball to everybody like as if he's Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. So what happened? He goes on his rant. And after his rant, Nick Wright, who we almost never agree with, takes to his social media yesterday to call out JJ Redick. He put up a post that generated 1.5 million views. And I want to read what Nick Wright had to say. He said, "I totally understand folks who aren't into televised sports discussion / debate. It's not for everyone. I will never understand someone who is incredibly wealthy, opts into working in the space, and then simply uses the platform to complain about how useless / dumb the space is." That was Nick Wright reacting to JJ Redick. And here's why I want to agree with Nick Wright. JJ Redick is always whining and moaning and complaining about something. Always. If you look at the reaction between him, Stephen A. Smith, and Chris Mad Dog Russo, he was furious. The question is why? The question is why? Kevin Durant goes out there, he talks about whether or not people are giving him the proper amount of credit for his leadership. Fantastic. Stephen A. Smith reacts and says, no, you're getting the appropriate amount of credit that you deserve. That's his opinion. Chris Mad Dog Russo then goes out there and says, if we're talking about leaders, we're talking about Larry Bird. And I don't view myself as a leader. And by the way, Kevin Durant himself has said, I don't view myself as a leader. They have their positions. JJ Redick then comes in and starts hollering and complaining and screaming and shouting and all of that for absolutely no good reason. Here's something that is worth bringing up. We had a lot of high expectations for JJ Redick before he came into the sports media space. We produced the show on it, giving him his credit. But quickly I found out that all he was up there to do was basically apologize for every single thing players do. He was really, really afraid to take any position against players that would be in opposition to them. He was petrified to take a position. That's number one. Number two, we also noticed that whenever he brought players onto his show, he would never really ask them the tough questions. Really. And the biggest example of that was when Ben Simmons came on his show to basically turn himself into a victim, and there was no pushback. Well, a lot of journalists who have been doing this stuff longer than all of us have been questioning a lot of athletes who have their own shows who are rarely willing to push back on their guests. And we're not talking about their panelists. We're talking about the guests that they bring to their show, where all too often what happens is they come on there and they try to appease them and they essentially agree with every single thing that they say. This happens on many, many different occasions. But now it seems like we're getting to the point where various voices in sports are beginning to get turned off by JJ's constant whining and complaining. Why he does it, I don't know. The rant that he had on ESPN yesterday was absolutely unnecessary. Talking about why do hot takes and all of this stuff generate views and all of that stuff. Where are you at? Where are you at? Where do you live? What are you watching? What have you been noticing about sports media over the last 20 years? And it's something that journalists and athletes do all the time. Skip Bayless goes at LeBron James. It's a hot take. What is it? Gilbert Arena says Michael Jordan, the greatest player, the era 90s. It's a hot take. They're all doing it. But to JJ is this big mystery. We want to sit down. Why don't we sit down and discuss the X's and O's? Because you've seen an NBA fan attend a basketball game because they want to watch the X's and O's. Or I turn on an NBA game because I want to be entertained. If you want to open up a basketball school and people go in there and go do that. Most people use these sports as a form of entertainment. And at the heart of it, it is entertainment. These are my thoughts. Whatever you guys think, leave your thoughts in the comments and we catch you on the next show. Peace.